Karoline Leavitt's bold response to the comments made on The View demonstrated a powerful stand for dignity, reverence, and the importance of setting moral boundaries in televised discourse. In a media environment that often prioritizes shock, value, and sensationalism over substance and respect, her confrontation stood as a rare moment of principled defiance. It wasn't about party politics or ideological superiority. It was about calling out a breach in basic human decency that struck a nerve with millions of people watching. Her decision to address the issue head-on was not one made lightly. In a world where confronting popular TV personalities can often lead to backlash, ridicule, or even cancellation, she took a risk in speaking out. But the heart of her message was clear. Moments of loss, grief, and cultural mourning require more from public figures than glib jokes or dismissive laughter. They demand a level of solemnity and recognition that transcends personal opinions or ratings. What Leavitt effectively did was draw a line, one that said, certain things aren't just political talking points or content fodder for entertainment, television. Certain moments, especially those involving death or the legacy of individuals who hold deep spiritual and cultural significance for millions, deserve a measure of reverence. Her tone was unapologetic yet composed, showing that one can be passionate without being performative. And in doing so, she mirrored the sentiments of many viewers who have grown increasingly disillusioned with how easily morality and empathy can be tossed aside in the name of commentary. It was also a moment that illustrated the widening gap between the media elite and the general public. While some shows aim to provoke reactions under the guise of satire or edgy humor, many Americans are watching from their homes feeling alienated, shocked, or offended by the apparent detachment from values they hold dear. Leavitt's intervention served as a voice for those people, individuals who often feel unheard or dismissed by large media institutions. She captured the outrage and heartbreak in a way that wasn't theatrical, but firmly grounded in conviction. The effectiveness of her message lay not just in what she said, but how she said it. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't ranting. She presented her case with the clarity and confidence of someone who knew that her stance was rooted in something deeper than political allegiance. She was defending the principle of respect in the public square, a principle that's become increasingly rare. And that's what resonated, the reminder that decency doesn't have to be a casualty in our culture wars. Moreover, the moment served as a cultural mirror. It forced audiences to confront what has become acceptable in the name of commentary. Are we okay with using death as a punchline? Have we become so desensitized that spiritual leaders, regardless of one's personal beliefs, can be mocked on, live television without consequence? These are the uncomfortable questions that Leavitt's confrontation forced into the national conversation, whether viewers agreed with her or not. And while many on social media quickly rallied to debate the appropriateness of her remarks, what stood out more was the number of people who echoed her sentiments. Not because they were conservative, not because they were fans of hers, but because they understood that some things simply crossed the line. Her courage to speak out became a spark for a wider reflection on where that line actually is, and who, if anyone, is holding the media accountable when it's crossed. In essence, this wasn't about a single show or a single segment. It was about the broader cultural implications of how we talk about loss, legacy, and figures who have shaped lives and beliefs. Leavitt's voice cut through the noise, not because it was loud, but because it carried the weight of sincerity in a time when that's becoming increasingly rare. The confrontation brought forward a vital discussion about media accountability, a topic that often gets lost in the whirlwind of hot takes and viral moments. In an era where televised panels and talk shows shape much of public opinion, there is a growing expectation that those in front of the camera exercise a higher standard of judgment. Karoline Leavitt's response wasn't just a critique, it was a call to action, urging those with a platform to recognize the influence they wield and the responsibility that comes with it. When media figures speak, they do so not just as individuals, but as representatives of broader narratives that millions consume. The words they choose, the tone they set, and the boundaries they push all have a ripple effect far beyond the screen. It is easy to dismiss moments of controversy as just part of the entertainment cycle, But what often gets ignored is the long-term erosion of trust and civility that such moments contribute to. Leavitt's stance highlighted this erosion and questioned why so many in the media space appear indifferent to the consequences of their words. The issue wasn't about policing opinions or censoring speech. It was about holding individuals accountable for the manner in which they express those opinions, particularly when they touch on matters of life, death, faith, and cultural sensitivity. There's a difference between offering critique and trivializing something sacred to a vast number of people. That distinction is often lost in the fast-paced, applause-driven environment of live television, where shock and controversy are rewarded with clicks, shares, and ratings. By calling out the behavior in question, Leavitt emphasized that being in the media isn't just about entertaining an audience, it's also about modeling behavior. Television still has a unique power to shape culture. It creates norms, introduces ideas, and influences how people speak to each other. When influential, voices on widely watched platforms disregard the weight of their words. They inadvertently give others permission to do the same. The result is a culture that increasingly views disrespect as boldness and insensitivity as humor. What made her remarks particularly impactful was that they weren't framed as a partisan attack. They were framed as a plea for decency, an appeal to shared values that go beyond political lines. Respecting the dead, honoring cultural traditions, and acknowledging human dignity are concepts that should unite rather than divide. In making her point, Leavitt reminded everyone that the issue at hand wasn't about left or right, it was about right and wrong. Her confrontation also exposed the growing disconnect between media institutions and the audiences they serve. There's a growing perception that the voices behind the desk are out of touch with the values and concerns of everyday viewers. When viewers feel that deeply held beliefs or solemn moments are being mocked, they begin to question whether the people on screen actually represent them at all. Leavitt's message was a wake-up call to those in media positions. If you claim to speak for the public, you must also be willing to listen to the public. One of the deeper implications of the incident was the need to redefine what it means to be bold in the media space. Boldness isn't making fun of something just because it's controversial or because you think it will get attention. True boldness is being willing to challenge your own audience, to call for higher standards, even when it's uncomfortable, and to acknowledge when something simply goes too far. Leavitt did just that, not to score points, but to restore a level of decency that many feel is slipping away. Moreover, the confrontation invited viewers to reflect on the broader cultural landscape. Have we become so accustomed to outrage and sarcasm that we've lost sight of empathy? Are media figures now expected to be provocateurs instead of thoughtful commentators? The questions raised by this moment are essential for anyone who believes that media still has the potential to inform, uplift, and unite. Ultimately, the confrontation wasn't just about a single moment on a single show. It was a flashpoint in a much larger conversation about how we speak, how we listen, and how we hold one another accountable. Leavitt simply said what many were already thinking, that there's a line between critique and cruelty, and someone has to be brave enough to defend it. The public response to Karoline Leavitt's confrontation was immediate, passionate, and widespread, revealing a deep resonance with her message across various communities. Social media platforms lit up with reactions, ranging from measured support to emotional praise. People weren't just agreeing with her because of political affiliation. They were responding to a sense of shared values that her words seemed to reflect. In that moment, she became a vessel for frustrations many have long felt toward mainstream media, but hadn't seen articulated in such a clear and public way. Her stance tapped into a collective unease that's been brewing for years, the feeling that a growing disconnect exists between elite media circles and the average viewer. Many see a recurring pattern in televised commentary where important issues, particularly those involving culture, faith, or human dignity, are brushed off with sarcasm or contempt. Leavitt's decision to step into that space and demand a higher level of respect wasn't just seen as brave. It was cathartic for countless viewers who felt that someone finally spoke on their behalf. That sense of identification was clear in the reactions. People shared clips of her remarks with comments like, "Finally, someone said it," or "this," needed to be called out. The fact that her message gained traction so quickly speaks to how many people are exhausted by the tone of public discourse. They're tired of watching serious matters turned into punchlines, of feeling like their deeply held beliefs are dismissed as outdated or laughable. Leavitt's words hit home because they reminded people that respect should still have a place in public conversation, especially when it comes to moments of mourning or loss. Her supporters didn't view her remarks as an attack. They saw them as a defense of values that are increasingly being trampled under the weight of modern entertainment culture. They saw her drawing a line not out of anger, but out of care. Care for how we speak about others, care for how we present ourselves in public, and care for the example we set for the next generation. That care is what set her apart and what rallied people to her side. The emotional weight behind the support was also telling. Many people shared personal stories in response to her stance, stories about their own experiences with loss, their religious traditions, or their growing sense of alienation from media figures who seem to mock anything sacred. For them, Leavitt wasn't just making a political statement. She was acknowledging their lived realities, validating their grief, and defending their right to be respected in the national conversation. That's a powerful form of representation, one that goes beyond sound bites and speaks directly to the heart. What also stood out was the diversity of support. It didn't come only from political allies or media personalities. It came from everyday people, parents, students, clergy members, and workers who felt that she expressed something they could no longer say without being ridiculed. They felt that she spoke from a place of moral clarity, and that moral clarity offered a brief but vital counterweight to a culture increasingly defined by cynicism. In moments like these, public support becomes more than just applause. It becomes a signal. A signal to those in positions of power that audiences are paying attention, that they're no longer content to be passive consumers of media that degrades what they hold sacred. It becomes a reminder that public figures don't exist in a vacuum, and that their words, whether meant seriously or flippantly, carry real consequences. That's what made the support for Leavitt so striking. It wasn't a call for censorship or punishment. It was a call for better conversations, better standards, and better respect for the things that truly matter to people. When someone dares to speak that truth in a public space, especially one as charged and combative as live television, it's bound to resonate deeply. She gave voice to a form of silent frustration that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. And in doing so, she not only gained support, but sparked reflection. In a media culture that often moves from outrage to outrage, her words stood out as a moment of sincerity, an appeal to our better instincts rather than our most reactive impulses. That sincerity, more than anything else, is what people responded. The incident brought into sharp focus the broader implications of how media behaves, especially in a time where public trust in institutions continues to erode. Karoline Leavitt's confrontation wasn't just about a single controversial comment. It was a moment that forced both viewers and broadcasters to confront the deeper question. What role should the media play in shaping cultural norms and values? For too long, the answer to that question has been murky, distorted by a ratings-driven environment that often rewards outrage over empathy and spectacle over substance. Her response brought clarity to an issue many have been hesitant to name. The media landscape, especially in talk show formats, has increasingly blurred the lines between commentary and mockery, between criticism and cruelty. As ratings rise, standards seem to fall. Viewers have grown accustomed to watching complex issues reduced to quips and deeply significant events, whether personal, political, or spiritual, turned into punchlines. Leavitt's words disrupted that routine and demanded a moment of reflection. When those who hold microphones and sit behind studio desks make light of sensitive subjects, they're not just offering opinions, they're modeling behavior. Every segment, every comment, every dismissive laugh sets a tone that ripples outward into the culture. What is considered acceptable on those platforms often becomes the new norm in everyday conversation, in classrooms, on social media, and around dinner tables. That cultural trickle-down effect is powerful. It's also dangerous when it normalizes disrespect. What Leavitt effectively highlighted is that the media's reach comes with a responsibility that many seem to have abandoned. It's not enough to simply generate conversation. The nature of that conversation matters. Are the discussions fostering understanding or deepening divisions? Are they grounded in truth, or are they designed purely to provoke a reaction? Are they respectful of grief, belief, and dignity, or do they capitalize on these very things for entertainment value? This moment also exposed a deeper cultural fatigue. People aren't just angry at the media, they're tired of the cynicism, tired of watching tragedy become content, tired of watching beliefs they hold sacred reduced to jokes for applause. Leavitt gave voice to that fatigue, challenging the notion that being on television somehow absolves people from the need to show basic decency. Her confrontation was not a plea for censorship, but for accountability, a word that carries weight precisely because it's so often missing in these conversations. Accountability in media doesn't mean silencing difficult conversations or sanitizing opinions. It means recognizing when a line has been crossed and being willing to address it. It means having enough self-awareness to acknowledge when something said, even unintentionally, has caused real harm. Leavitt's words ask the media to consider what kind of legacy it's creating with every broadcast. Is it one of thoughtful engagement or one of casual cruelty disguised as commentary? The incident also touched on a fundamental question of leadership. Those with platforms, whether on television, radio, or online, are leaders in their own right. They influence hearts, minds, and discourse. With that influence comes a duty not just to inform or entertain, but to elevate, to encourage society to think more deeply, speak more carefully, and treat one another with more care. Leavitt's call-out challenged media figures to live up to that responsibility rather than shirk it under the guise of free speech or comedic license. Furthermore, it reignited a necessary conversation about what viewers want and expect from their media. Many are no longer willing to accept that edginess and disrespect are the price of relevance. They're looking for authenticity, for sincerity, and for conversations that don't leave them feeling insulted or disillusioned. Leavitt's confrontation tapped into that desire, reminding broadcasters that audiences are not passive. They are watching closely, forming opinions, and seeking voices that stand up for something real. By demanding higher standards, she didn't just challenge a moment. She challenged a system, one where ratings too often eclipse reflection and where provocation too often replaces principle. Her intervention asked media figures to look inward, to reassess the cultural tone they're helping to set, and to remember that the most powerful thing a public figure can do is lead with respect. In that sense, the moment became larger than itself, a flashpoint in the ongoing conversation about what kind of media and what kind of culture we are choosing to build. Karoline Leavitt's confrontation was more than a viral moment. It was a cultural checkpoint. In standing up against what she viewed as a blatant breach of decency, she brought to the surface a conversation that had long been bubbling beneath the surface. Her words were not just about defending tradition or reacting to an inappropriate comment. They were a broader challenge to the way we engage with one another in the public sphere. In an age where the loudest voices often win, her message cut through the noise with clarity and conviction. Respect is not outdated, and dignity still matters. What made her stand particularly resonant was that it wasn't performative. It wasn't driven by a desire for attention or a moment in the spotlight. It came from a sincere place of conviction, and that sincerity was palpable. In choosing to speak up, she tapped into a widespread feeling that so many people share, that media has drifted too far from its responsibility to inform and uplift, and too often indulges in behavior that cheapens our discourse and desensitizes our culture. This moment also served as a reminder of the power individuals have to push back against dominant narratives. You don't need a massive platform to call out what you believe is wrong. You just need the courage to say what needs to be said, especially when others remain silent. Leavitt's willingness to step into that space, knowing full well it would bring criticism, shows a form of leadership that is both rare and necessary. Her actions have sparked dialogue far beyond the confines of the original controversy. People are now asking themselves what they truly want from their media. Are we okay with tuning into programs that belittle others for laughs? Are we comfortable with a public square that makes a spectacle of solemn moments? Or are we ready to demand better, not just from media figures, but from ourselves and the conversations we participate in? The outpouring of support she received speaks volumes. It wasn't manufactured or superficial. It was organic and deeply emotional. People felt seen, heard, and represented in a way they hadn't in a long time. That kind of response doesn't happen unless something deeply true has been touched. Ultimately, the confrontation acted as a cultural mirror. It reflected both what we've become used to and what we're still yearning for. A society that values empathy over sarcasm, integrity over performance, and respect over ridicule. If nothing else, it proved that even in an age of endless content and fleeting headlines, there is still space for real values to break through and for someone to stand up and remind